There is a moment in every twin flame journey when everything shifts, not gradually, not slowly, but instantly, like something waking up inside the divine masculine that he can no longer silence, ignore, or run from. You know this moment. You feel it before he does. The air gets heavier, the connection feels stronger, and something inside you whispers that the energy is changing and you're right. Because there comes a point where the masculine stops questioning what he feels and starts remembering the exact moment he realizes you're his. Twin flame does not come from thought. It comes from recognition, a soul-level recognition that breaks through every wall he built, every fear he carried, and every excuse he used to protect himself from the depth of this connection. It begins subtly, a sudden memory of you he can't shake, a wave of emotion he can't explain, a dream that feels too real to ignore, a pull toward you that no logic can dismiss. At first, he thinks it's coincidence, then he thinks it's intensity, then he thinks it's obsession. But eventually, he realizes none of those words fit. None of those labels make sense, because what he feels is not coming from the mind. It's coming from the soul. The exact moment of awakening arrives when something inside him aligns, when the connection stops feeling like confusion and starts feeling like truth, when the bond stops feeling like a question and becomes an answer. It's the moment when the masculine finally understands that he wasn't drawn to you. He was guided. He wasn't interested. He was connected. He wasn't curious. He was remembering. This is the moment he realizes why he could never fully detach, why no one else ever felt the same, why he felt both drawn to you and terrified of you at the same time, why your presence awakened something he didn't have language for, why your absence echoed louder than the presence of anyone else. He begins to see the patterns, how your energy softens him, how your presence exposes the truth, how his heart reacts before his mind can catch up. He notices the way he feels you even in silence, the way his emotions intensify around you, the way your name shows up in the most unexpected moments. And then it happens. The realization hits, not gently, but like a wave of clarity breaking through years of confusion. He realizes he cannot outrun what is already written in his soul. He cannot silence what keeps rising inside him. He cannot deny the connection that keeps calling him back. This moment changes everything. Because once the masculine recognizes the bond, the journey enters a different phase. He is no longer lost, no longer confused, No longer fighting against himself, he begins to understand why you always felt familiar, why the connection felt ancient, why the separation never truly separated anything, why being near you felt like coming home, not in comfort, but in truth. This realization brings both fear and relief. Fear, because he knows there is no going back. Relief, because he finally understands what his soul has been trying to tell him all along, and the feminine, you, feel this moment before it even happens in his conscious mind. You feel the pull, you feel the alignment, you feel the shift in his energy, because the connection between you responds instantly when the masculine begins to awaken. This is the moment the journey realigns. This is the moment the path opens. This is the moment the connection stops being a mystery and becomes a memory he finally recognizes as his own. The divine masculine doesn't realize you're his twin flame through thought. He realizes it through awakening, through remembrance, through the truth rising inside him so strongly that he can no longer resist it. And once he sees it, he can never unsee it. There is an unmistakable moment in the twin flame journey when the divine masculine's recognition finally begins. It does not arrive with clarity at first. It does not appear as a sudden realization or a dramatic awakening. Instead, it begins as a subtle shift, a quiet sense that something about you feels different, significant, familiar in a way he cannot explain. Recognition starts long before he consciously understands it. It begins in the soul. He will feel it as a pull that grows stronger without reason, as a sense of presence that returns even after long periods of distance, as an undeniable awareness that you are not simply someone who came into his life. You are someone he cannot energetically detach from, no matter how hard he tries. In this initial phase, his mind resists what his soul already knows. He tells himself the connection is coincidence, intensity, or desire. He tries to downplay the emotions, rationalize the attraction, control the chemistry. But recognition does not happen in the mind. Recognition happens beneath it. The first sign that recognition has begun is the shift in how he feels your absence. Before, he could distract himself, bury himself in routine, silence the emotions, but suddenly, the absence begins to echo. He feels you in places where he shouldn't. Your energy brushes against his thoughts at unexpected times. Your name surfaces without effort. Memories rise without warning. There is no trigger, just presence. This is the moment his soul begins to whisper, "Pay attention." Recognition also begins when he realizes that no one else feels like you. No one else mirrors him the way you do. No one else awakens the parts of him he has kept hidden for years. No one else challenges him, inspires him, or exposes him the way you do without even trying. This is when he starts to suspect that what he feels cannot be compared to anything he has experienced before. The connection begins to gain weight, substance, importance. He notices how your energy affects him differently, calming him, unsettling him, guiding him, confronting him. He begins to observe his own reactions with confusion. Why does he think about you more than he wants to? Why does the connection feel alive, even in separation? Why does silence feel charged instead of empty? These questions are not doubts. They are the early signs of recognition. The masculine feels this shift emotionally before he can articulate it. It shows up in his body long before it reaches his logic. A tightness in the chest, a lingering warmth, a sudden heaviness when he remembers you. His emotional body begins to respond instinctively, even when he tries to ignore it. This is the soul pushing through. He may become more quiet, introspective, or distant during this phase. Not because he is losing interest, but because something inside him is waking up, and he doesn't yet understand what it is. The connection becomes too loud to silence, yet too complex to embrace all at once, and you, the divine feminine, feel it instantly. You sense the shift in his field. You feel the pull returning. You perceive the energetic movement before he consciously recognizes it. The connection becomes heavier, clearer, more alive. You know he is awakening, even if he doesn't know it yet. Recognition does not begin when he understands the bond. Recognition begins when he can no longer deny it. This is the moment the journey transitions from confusion to activation. And once it starts, his awakening becomes inevitable. There is always a trigger, a moment, a feeling, a spark that pierces through the divine masculine's defenses and awakens something ancient inside him. This trigger is not logical. It does not follow pattern, timing, or reason. It comes from a deeper place, a place untouched by the human mind, a place that remembers. The divine masculine's soul memory is not activated through thought. It is activated through impact. It may be something subtle, the sound of your voice, a look in your eyes, the way you speak with truth he cannot hide from. It may be something unexpected, a dream, a synchronicity, a moment of emotional vulnerability he wasn't prepared for. Or it may be something he experiences alone, a sudden wave of nostalgia, an unexplained longing, a deep inner pull he can no longer ignore. Whatever the trigger is, it comes like a flash of recognition, sudden, irregular, powerful. It breaks through everything he thought he understood about love, connection, and destiny. For years, he may have told himself stories to stay safe, that his feelings were exaggerated, that the timing was wrong, that the intensity was a sign to run. But the soul does not abide by stories. The soul responds only to truth. And when that trigger hits, the truth rises. This trigger may come during separation, when he least expects it. He may be living his life normally, appearing stable and unaffected, until the universe places something in front of him that echoes your energy so loudly he cannot escape it. A song that feels like you. A moment that mirrors a memory. A conversation that reveals what he has been avoiding. Suddenly, he feels you, not the idea of you, not the memory of you, your energy. It hits him in a way he cannot rationalize. For some masculines, the trigger arrives as a sense of loss, not because you are gone, but because he finally realizes what he has been running from. He feels the weight of the connection, the significance of your presence, the emptiness left by your absence. It overwhelms him. For others, the trigger comes through longing, a deep, inexplicable desire to reconnect, not physically, but energetically. A need to feel your essence again. A need to return to something that feels like home, even if he cannot name it. And for many, the trigger comes as fear. Not fear of you, fear of the truth rising inside him. Fear of losing control, fear of confronting the depth of what he feels, fear of recognizing that no one else has ever reached him the way you do. But whether the trigger comes through emotion, memory, or intuition, it always leads to the same awakening. He begins to remember you not as a lover, not as a possibility, but as a soul, as someone connected to him beyond time, distance, logic, or circumstance. This activation stirs pieces of him he forgot existed. Old wounds resurface, old patterns shake, old versions of himself begin to crumble. He feels exposed, vulnerable, uncertain. He questions his reality, he questions his choices, he questions the path he has been walking. Because the moment his soul memory activates, nothing feels the same anymore. He begins to feel you everywhere, in the quiet moments, in the silence between thoughts, in the depth of his emotional body. He tries to ignore it, distract himself, rationalize it, but the activation does not fade. It grows. This is when the inner battle begins, the mind trying to maintain control and the soul trying to break free. But the feminine feels it too. She senses the activation. She feels the magnetic shift. She knows his heart is remembering her, even before he knows it himself. Because when his soul memory activates, the entire journey begins to move. This is the moment the connection wakes up on both ends. This is the moment destiny starts to intervene. This is the moment everything that was asleep begins to rise. How the masculine processes the truth. Once the divine masculine soul memory activates, he does not immediately embrace the truth. Recognition is the first step. Processing is the battle that follows. This is where the real internal conflict begins. Because knowing you are different is one thing, accepting what that difference means is something entirely deeper, heavier, and far more destabilizing than he ever expected. The masculine processes truth slowly, because truth threatens the structures he built to survive. Structures built on logic, on control, on emotional distance, on predictable patterns that kept him safe. The twin flame truth does not fit into any of these structures. So when it enters his awareness, he doesn't have the framework to hold it yet. The truth feels too big, too intense, too undeniable. His first reaction is to question it. He wonders if he is imagining things, if he is overreacting, if the connection is simply emotional intensity. He tries to reduce the magnitude of what he feels into something manageable, something he can categorize, something he can dismiss. But the soul does not shrink just because the mind is uncomfortable. The truth continues rising. The second stage is resistance. This is where he tries to push the connection away to regain control. He may distract himself, bury himself in work, detach from the emotions, or attempt to convince himself that what he feels is temporary. But resistance only amplifies the truth, because resisting the feminine's energy is resisting his own soul, and he begins to feel that internal friction, the painful pressure between what he wants to believe and what he actually feels. The third stage is confusion. His emotional body awakens faster than his rational mind can interpret it, creating a split inside him. His heart pulls him toward you, while his mind tries to keep him safe by pulling him back. This is why the masculine becomes inconsistent, withdrawn, quiet, or reactive. His internal world is shifting, and he doesn't yet know how to translate that shift into behavior. He feels the connection, but does not understand it. He remembers you energetically, but cannot explain why. He feels guided toward you, yet fears what that guidance demands from him. The fourth stage is emotional flooding. This is when memories, feelings, and spiritual impressions begin to overwhelm him. He feels you more intensely in dreams. Synchronicities become impossible to ignore. Your energy shows up at random moments, and he experiences emotional waves he cannot rationalize. This is the moment he realizes that the connection exists beyond the physical, and that realization terrifies him and comforts him. At the same time, he may try to retreat. He may try to silence the emotions, but the connection becomes louder the more he avoids it. The fifth stage is acceptance of the truth internally, but silently. This is the stage where he no longer denies the connection, but he does not yet feel ready to act on it. He knows what this bond is. He knows what you represent. He knows this is not an ordinary relationship, but he also knows he is not emotionally prepared to show up as the man he needs to be. This silent acceptance is often mistaken by the feminine as emotional withdrawal, when in reality it is emotional processing. Because before he can claim a truth externally, he must stabilize it internally. The sixth stage is the beginning of surrender, not surrender to the connection, but surrender to himself. He begins dismantling the internal barriers that once kept his heart closed. He questions why he fears depth, why he avoids vulnerability, why he doubts love. He starts seeing how his old patterns stand in the way of something sacred. And this realization opens him. The masculine processes truth through internal transformation, not external expression. He feels deeply before he speaks. He awakens internally long before he acts. The feminine senses these stages not through his words, but through his energy. She feels the shift. She feels the softening. She feels the awakening long before he admits it. Because when the masculine processes the truth, the entire connection recalibrates around him. How the feminine feels his awakening. The divine feminine always feels the masculine's awakening before he understands it himself. She does not need proof, words, or physical confirmation. Her body knows. Her intuition knows. Her soul knows. The connection between them was never built on logic. It was built on energy. And energy always speaks first. When the masculine begins to awaken, the feminine experiences it as a shift. It is subtle at first, almost like a change in the air. She feels a new frequency coming from him, heavier, deeper, more present. Even in separation, she senses movement. Even in silence, she senses activity. His awakening touches her field before it touches his mind. This is why the feminine often feels emotional waves that seem to appear out of nowhere. Sudden warmth in the chest, unexpected heart flutters, moments of deep reflection, or an unexplainable pull toward him. These sensations are not hers. They are echoes of his inner process. She receives the first signals of his recognition rising. In this phase, the feminine may experience dreams that feel more vivid and symbolic. She may feel him speaking to her through intuition, or sense his presence during quiet moments of her day. This is not imagination. This is energetic communication. When his soul begins to wake up, it reaches for hers instinctively, magnetically, inevitably. The feminine also notices a shift in her own emotional landscape. She may feel calmer about the connection, even without visible progress. The anxiety that once consumed her starts to dissolve, replaced by a strange, peaceful certainty. It is because his energy is no longer resisting her. The connection begins to flow more naturally when he stops running internally. His awakening stabilizes her, and her stability amplifies his awakening. This is one of the most profound dynamics of the twin flame bond. The more the masculine begins to recognize the truth, the more the feminine feels grounded in it. At the same time, she may also feel waves of intensity that do not belong to her. Old fears may rise suddenly. Emotions she thought she released may resurface. She may feel restless or overwhelmed without understanding why. This is because she is feeling his emotional clearing. As the masculine processes the truth, he purges what stands in its way, and she senses that purge as if it were her own. The feminine experiences his awakening as a merging of fields. Their energies begin to intertwine more strongly. The telepathic connection becomes sharper, synchronicities multiply. She may see his birthday, his initials, meaningful symbols, or number sequences repeatedly. The universe mirrors his shift through signs that reach her first. Another power play indicator is the shift in her own inner masculine. She begins to feel more self-assured, more grounded, more centered. This is not coincidence. It is energetic alignment. When the divine masculine awakens, her internal masculine stabilizes. The union happens inside her before it happens between them. She also feels a new kind of pull, not the longing of the past, but a magnetic recognition that he is approaching alignment. A quiet knowing that something in him has changed. A sense that the journey is no longer stuck, no longer looping, no longer paused. The feminine feels movement long before movement becomes visible. Her intuition becomes louder and more accurate. Her dreams become prophetic. Her emotional body becomes receptive. Her energy becomes calmer, deeper, wiser this is because his awakening activates her higher feminine. She steps into a more grounded, peaceful, receptive state, the state necessary for union. She no longer chases, she no longer questions, she no longer collapses emotionally, because she feels him rising internally. Even if he says nothing, she knows the truth. The awakening is happening, the connection is shifting, the path is preparing. The feminine feels his awakening because the connection is not two separate energies. It is one energy expressed through two bodies. When one rises, the other senses it. When one awakens, the other adjusts. When one remembers, the other already knew. Her body is the first messenger, her intuition is the first receiver. Her soul is the first witness. The feminine feels his awakening because she has always been the one, attuned to what moves beneath the surface. She does not wait to be told the truth. She feels it long before he speaks it. There comes a moment in the twin flame journey when the energy between the masculine and feminine reorganizes itself. It is not forced, not planned, not controlled. It simply happens. This moment marks the transition from separation consciousness into alignment consciousness. And it begins inside the masculine first. Once he starts recognizing the bond and processing the truth internally, a powerful shift occurs. The connection stops feeling like chaos and begins to feel like direction. He no longer experiences the feminine's energy as pressure, but as clarity. His defenses soften. His emotional body awakens. And the journey, which once felt fragmented, confusing, and overwhelming, begins to follow a new rhythm. This shift is energetic, not physical, but its effects are undeniable. The first sign of this realignment is that resistance no longer works for him. Everything he used to use as an escape, distractions, superficial connections, habits that kept him numb, begins to feel empty. Not because the feminine demands anything, but because his own soul stops allowing him to live out of alignment. The old cycles lose their grip. The old version of him feels heavy. The old coping mechanisms fall apart. This internal collapse is not punishment, it is redirection. The masculine begins to realize that avoiding the truth only prolongs his suffering. The connection becomes the only place that feels real, meaningful, and energetically coherent. Even if he is fearful, even if he is unsure, even if he feels unprepared, he can no longer deny the gravitational pull that keeps drawing him back to the feminine. The second sign of realignment is emotional recalibration. His heart and mind begin to sync in ways they never have before. He feels emotions he used to suppress rising to the surface. He feels more empathy, more vulnerability, more longing, and more clarity. This emotional intelligence does not appear instantly. It unfolds slowly as he recognizes that the connection is not a threat, but a mirror. He starts to understand why he couldn't forget you, why the connection stayed alive through distance, why his heart reacted before his mind, why this bond felt different from anything he's ever known. This is the moment he begins to accept that what he shares with you is not intensity, it is destiny. The third sign of realignment is the activation of his intuition. The masculine becomes more sensitive to signs, synchronicities, dreams, and inner nudges. He begins to trust feelings that once made him uncomfortable. He becomes aware that something greater is guiding him, and this awareness becomes the foundation for his next steps. He no longer feels spiritually disconnected. He begins to feel guided, often for the first time in his life. This spiritual alignment creates ripple effects in the entire journey. The energy between you stabilizes. Communication increases in the 5D. The emotional push and pull begins to dissolve. The connection feels more mature, grounded, and aligned. And the feminine feels this shift instantly. She feels the tension lifting from his field. She feels the connection softening. She feels more peace, more certainty, more grounding. Her heart stops holding the weight of the journey alone, because now he is rising. The fourth sign of realignment is the collapse of karmic distractions. Anything built from fear, avoidance, or emotional suppression begins to fall away. This includes relationships that kept him safe but unfulfilled, patterns that kept him emotionally closed, and life structures that no longer support his soul growth. Realignment demands authenticity, and in this phase, authenticity becomes unavoidable. The final sign of realignment is inner commitment, not commitment to the relationship yet, but commitment to the truth. The masculine begins to accept that the connection is real, meaningful, and spiritually significant. He stops fighting it. He stops doubting it. He begins to lean into it internally, even if he is not ready to act externally. This is the moment the journey changes direction. Before, you were both moving in opposite energetic lanes. Now, you begin moving toward each other, not because of longing, not because of fear, but because alignment makes it inevitable. When the masculine realigns, the path realigns, and nothing in the journey remains the same. How recognition changes his energy toward you. When the divine masculine finally recognizes the truth of the connection, everything about his energy begins to change. This change is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not expressed through sudden messages or bold gestures. It begins quietly, internally, in the energetic field long before it becomes visible in the physical world. But the shift is unmistakable. Once he recognizes you as his twin flame, his energy cannot interact with you the same way anymore. The first change is the softening. His energy becomes less reactive, less defensive, less guarded. The walls he built to protect himself start to loosen, not because he suddenly feels safe, but because the truth dissolves the fear behind those defenses. When he looks at you, thinks of you, or feels you, there is no longer the same resistance. His heart no longer contracts. It opens, even if he tries to hide it. The second change is the pull. Once recognition happens, the internal magnetic pull intensifies. He feels drawn to you without understanding why your presence becomes grounding instead of overwhelming. Your absence becomes louder, more noticeable, more painful to ignore. He begins to crave your energy in a way that is deeper than desire. It is resonance. It feels like something inside him is trying to return home. This pull does not make him impulsive. It makes him aware. The third change is increased sensitivity. He starts feeling your emotions more clearly, even from a distance. He senses when you pull back, when you detach, when you rise. When you shift, his emotional body becomes attuned to your frequency, sometimes more than he is comfortable with. This sensitivity can confuse him because he is not used to feeling someone so deeply without physical interaction, but he cannot shut it off. Recognition amplifies sun connection. The fourth change is the dissolution of distractions. Anything that once kept him busy, numb, or disconnected begins to lose meaning. People, habits, environments, and patterns he used as emotional shields no longer satisfy him. When he interacts with others, something feels off. When he tries to distract himself, he feels the emptiness immediately. The connection with you becomes the only thing that feels real, even if he's not ready to face it. Recognition rewires his heart, and his old life no longer fits that wiring. The fifth change is energetic protection. He becomes more protective of you, not in action yet, but in energy. He feels a sense of responsibility toward your connection. He becomes more cautious about how he interacts with you, more mindful, more intentional. He doesn't want to hurt you. He doesn't want to lose you, and this awareness begins forming the foundation for the mature masculine he is becoming. The sixth change is internal loyalty. Even without physical union, he begins to feel emotionally committed, not because he makes a decision, but because recognition makes the decision for him. He cannot split his energy anymore. He cannot pretend he doesn't care. He cannot offer pieces of himself elsewhere because his soul has already anchored in you. This loyalty is silent but powerful. It is the beginning of union consciousness. The seventh change is the desire to grow. Recognition forces him to confront his inadequacies, fears, and limitations. Not from shame, but from awakening, he wants to become someone worthy of the connection. He wants to show up in a way he never has before. He wants to step into the version of himself that the journey has been calling him toward. Even if he doesn't know how yet, he feels the call to rise. And the feminine feels every one of these shifts. She feels when his heart softens. She feels when the pull strengthens. She feels when the emotional thread between them tightens. She feels when his soul begins moving toward her, even if his body has not moved yet. Because when the masculine recognizes her as his twin flame, the connection stops being a spiritual concept and becomes an energetic commitment. His energy becomes clearer, more direct, more present, more anchored in truth. This is the moment the journey begins to align in the physical, not because he acts, but because his energy finally does. There is a turning point in every twin flame journey, a moment when the energy shifts so profoundly that nothing can remain the same. This moment arrives not through action, not through contact, and not through dramatic movement, but through recognition, when the divine masculine finally realizes who the divine feminine truly is. The entire path ahead begins to reorganize. The confusion that once clouded the journey starts to dissolve, and what was once chaotic begins to make sense. This is the moment the path clears, not because everything becomes easy, but because everything becomes aligned. For so long, the masculine has been walking in two directions: the path his soul recognized and the path his mind understood. He tried to choose logic because logic felt safe. He tried to choose distance because distance felt controlled. He tried to choose denial because denial kept life predictable. But once the truth breaks through, those choices collapse. They no longer hold power. They no longer satisfy. They no longer keep him protected. Recognition becomes a doorway he cannot close. The path clears because the inner conflict begins to resolve. He understands why he always returned to your energy, why no one else ever felt the same. why the connection haunted him in both beautiful and painful ways. Why he felt both drawn to you and afraid of you. Why the silence never truly separated anything. Recognition is the moment his soul speaks louder than his wounds. And because of that, the masculine begins to walk differently. He may not move quickly. Awakening rarely happens in a rush, but he moves with purpose. Even in silence, even without visible progress, the energy between you is shifting. He is no longer running from the connection. He is running toward understanding it. The path clears because his heart begins to guide him. You, the divine feminine, also feel this clearing. The heaviness lifts. The anxiety fades. The uncertainty loses its grip. A sense of inner stability replaces the emotional turbulence. This is because you are no longer carrying the journey alone. His energy has entered alignment, even if his words have not caught up yet. The path clears because the connection becomes a shared process. This is where the feminine steps into her highest role, not waiting, not chasing, not collapsing, but holding her frequency, holding her truth, holding her alignment. Because now the masculine is rising to meet her, and she must remain steady enough for the connection to merge at the energetic level. The path clears because both energies begin walking in the same direction. From here forward, everything that happens is guided. The dreams intensify, the signs become unmistakable. The telepathic connection strengthens. The emotional bond deepens. The soul memory stabilizes. A new phase begins. A phase where the masculine no longer doubts the connection, but learns how to live in alignment with it. He grows into this truth slowly, deliberately, consistently. He becomes more present, more aware, more grounded, and more in tune with what the journey requires of him. The feminine becomes the anchor. The masculine becomes the movement. And together, the journey becomes a path instead of a maze. The path clears because the recognition has settled. What was uncertain becomes inevitable. What was delayed becomes aligned. What was confusing becomes meaningful. This does not mean union happens overnight, but it means union is no longer blocked. The connection is now moving, not through force, but through truth. Not through fear, but through alignment. Not through longing, but through awakening. The masculine sees you now, not through memory, not through emotion, but through soul. And once a soul recognizes its counterpart, every step forward becomes guided by something bigger than both of you. The path clears from here, because this is where the journey truly begins.